Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll gain confidence, clarity, and a competitive edge in a crowded marketplace so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm joined by my friend Chris Hinds of Equalize Digital. Stick around to hear about his story about having a generalist web agency and going into a specialized accessibility agency. It's so great to finally talk to you, Chris. I know we had a few attempts and it didn't work out, so I'm really excited to talk to you finally.
It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks. And I normally start out each episode that when I have a guest on with a couple of fun questions. And I have some questions, but first, I saw that you attended the Culinary Institute of America, so I really have to ask how you went from there to getting into websites.
That is quite the story. And if you, I know at least some of your audience is in the WordPress space, right, Colleen?
Yeah, yeah.
So some of your listeners have probably heard of WordPress.tv. So
Mhm.
there are two talks by me on WordPress.tv about that exact thing. If you
Wow.
look for From Chef to COO, Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire, it has the full story, but I will save your audience the time and give you the short version. Which is I am indeed a trained chef. I worked for 10 years behind the stove up to the executive chef level, have
Wow.
opened and closed restaurants, done the whole nine yards. And the way that I got into the WordPress space and into the agency space was through my wife, who is now my CEO, also, Amber, who had a freelance business that helped us earn extra money because, as many people probably know, you don't make very good money in restaurants. So that was her side hustle that helped supplement our
Mm.
income, that eventually turned into a full-fledged business. That in 2016 I left the restaurant industry and helped rebrand, and turn into the agency that has since shifted into a more specialized form, which I know we're going to talk about. But that's the short version.
Wow, that's really interesting. Well, so okay, so here's my questions then. So there's got to be, as somebody who's done all that with cooking, there's got to be, you have to have your favorite thing. What is your favorite
Mhm.
thing to cook?
So I get that question a lot, and it's a lot of trained chefs will say that they don't like that question because it's like so hard to choose. But for me, it's actually a very easy answer, which is I love preparing, enjoying, and exposing other people to authentic Indian cuisine. So
Oh, cool.
the very first chef that I worked under was from Kerala in South India, and trained me how to make that kind of food authentically, gifted me cookbooks. And this was like when I was like 18 or 19. So it was definitely in like my formative years of developing my own culinary identity and palate. And so even to this day, my family celebrates Diwali annually, the Indian Festival of Lights. We invite a bunch of friends over and I make a ton of authentic Indian cuisine, and we all eat until we can't move, is generally how it goes. And I am very proud to say that we also have Indian families come that are like from India. For people watching the video, I'm very obviously not from India, but we have Indian families come, and they're like, "Wow." They're doing double takes looking at me. They're like, "Did you really make this? You didn't like have someone else bring this in, right?" So I'm pretty pleased with that reaction when I get it. But no,
Oh,
it's,
wow,
it's
that's really
Indian food,
cool.
hands down.
That's so cool. So, okay, but there's got to be then one thing that you never want to eat that someone else makes because it's not you making it. Like what is that one food? There's got to be something. What can you never eat somewhere else because you make it so good? You just can't have it anywhere else.
I'm going to sound like an egotist here, but that is my most common experience at most mid-range restaurants is I could have made this better at home. And so generally for me, like at least 8 out of 10 times, the benefit of going to a restaurant is purely that I don't have to do the dishes afterwards, and clean up. It's not because the food is better than what would be at home. So any mid-range casual place that I might find myself at, I 100% could have made it better at home, but it's about saving the time more than anything else.
But if you're wait a minute, if you're cooking, doesn't Amber do the dishes then?
Not always. No, I'm generally the guy that's in the kitchen. She has it pretty good in that regard, but I get to not touch the laundry, so we have balance in all
Okay.
things.
Okay, because like I don't do any of the cooking. Like I can make eggs, I can like scramble eggs, and I can bake cookies. But my husband does all the cooking. and he does it
Uh-huh.
really well, but and I told him he should be a chef, but so I do all the cleanup with that. So that's funny. Well, okay, so let's talk about Road Warrior Creative. That was the business that you had before. So now you've been with Equalize Digital now. You have had that for what, 3 years, I think?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Okay, so tell me about Road Warrior Creative. Like, what was that like? What kind of work did you do? Who were your clients? You know.
Mhm. So Road Warrior Creative was um, a web agency that grew over time to have uh, 5 full-time W-2 team members plus a handful of contractors. So it was still very much a small agency. Um, and it paid the bills. It was never much more than a kind of a lifestyle business, if that makes sense. And it was inside out branded. So the name didn't mean anything to anyone else except for us internally, because it was all about freedom. We lived and worked out of a travel trailer during the summers and traveled around. And if you
Oh, cool.
looked at the old website, which you could probably still find it on the Wayback Machine. Most of it's redirected to Equalize Digital now, but there were even pictures and video of the trailer, which we had fully wrapped and branded. And so it was a brand that spoke to our team and us internally, but not really to customers. And so as a result of that, because we weren't specialized, we were generalists, and we did everything from SEO and online marketing, email, social, etc., ads, to building websites. We attracted a very general group of customers. So we had a collection of people in the public event space. We had some in the public sector. We had just some general small businesses. We also had some people that were like in higher education. Over time, we accumulated some of those. And then the other one that we did have for a while is we had a small handful of food brands, which obviously for that, it translated or resonated with them about, in terms of my background. And for a while there, I was even doing like some food styling and food photography and food videography for those brands.
Oh, cool.
But it was just one of those companies that kind of grew out of that desire to have more freedom, more self determination, not have to ask anyone if you're going to travel somewhere or do something, and to just have something that could pay the bills, could support a few people and their families, and it was less about specializing in any one thing.
Well, so what you had a team, but like, did you ever find, because I have found this going from like just being one person to having, a couple people working for me and helping, is that did you find that doing all these different things, it was hard to come up with like processes for like all these different kinds of work, and it's like a lot of, switching hats all the time?
It was incredibly hard, and to some extent, even as we've specialized, it's still difficult to manage processes effectively, and that's something that we're still working on today. To be honest, I think working on refining processes, making them more efficient, documenting them effectively is a constant. Although I will say, the more you do, the harder it is to document everything effectively, right? And so we found ourselves just trying to find people that could own a particular aspect of what we were delivering and not have to have their work checked and just deliver the outcome effectively, right? And we had like just outcome focused sort of jobs or roles in the team. So we had our developer, who is now our business partner, Steve. He owned development; that was his responsibility. And it was entirely up to him to achieve the outcomes that were set up for him. That is not the most ideal way to run a company, obviously, because you have no ability to train or upgrade your team if you're having to only hire people who are perfect at what their area of expertise is, right, or near perfect. And so that was incredibly challenging, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that when I was doing all the things, like you even mentioned, like emails and ads and all this other stuff, it's like, oh my god, the email code would drive me nuts. It was everybody wanted everything to be pixel perfect. And it's like it's just not going to happen like that. It's too much. But
Hmm.
you know, I also found that when I was a generalist, I was competing for projects instead of people just coming to me and like, I need to work with you, right? So I felt like it was more of like, well, we're talking to all these different designers. And then, I had a lot of repeat clients that would stay with me that worked with me for years, even decades. But when it came to getting new clients, I found it really hard as a generalist. Did you have that same kind of experience?
Yes. So for us, the growth strategy primarily focused on, and it wasn't super effective. Otherwise, I think we would still have that agency, right? Because if the agency was wildly successful, there would have been no reason to specialize or do what we did, which I'm sure we'll get into more later. But the it was our growth was 90% like referral or repeat business driven, and that's just not risk that you want to take on if you can help it, right?
Right.
If 80% of your income, in our case back in the agency days, was coming from 5 or 6 customers, you lose even one or two of those in a period of 3 to 6 months, you're in serious trouble, especially if you have a team who's relying on you to cover their salaries.
Right.
So that was incredibly difficult. And yes, to your other point, the more you specialize and do really intentional marketing around that specialization, the better of a time you're going to have in general, just getting leads coming in and getting people that can engage with you, whether you're using a free product or putting out some sort of content or whatever it is, right? That's kind of making up your presence that brings people in. If you're just focused on a very small subset of things within a niche, um, your your effort is just naturally more focused, and you're going to get more people that are coming to you for that specific thing, that specific need. You can usually charge more too, which is a secondary benefit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience too. But it's funny about like when you become known for that one thing, that's really when you get all that traction. I mean, that's how it was for me. Like I didn't I started my business in 2003 and it wasn't until 2016 when I started specializing and that's when I got into accessibility. But I searched for years. I talked to different coaches. I'm like, what is my thing going to be, right? It was like I was mostly serving nonprofits and I'm just like, but I'm doing all the things and nonprofits isn't a niche. And
Hmm.
I was like, maybe I should focus on a certain type of nonprofit, or do just focus on certain type of work. And I'm like, oh, but I like the creative stuff and oh, I like the technical and I do them both really well. I can't pick. And I was in this limbo for years. And then accessibility just happened to be by accident. And then like that whole thing just took off. So it was like once people started knowing me as not just like a graphic designer, it was like, oh, you're that accessibility person. And then it was like
Yes.
anybody would hear the word accessibility, and then I'm getting tagged in Facebook groups or on LinkedIn or people are introducing me via email like you're the person I need to talk to. And that was like so much easier.
Yeah. It's incredibly easy when you become known for a thing, whether it's an individual person or a company or a combination of the two, right? And that's something that I think Amber, our CEO, has really mastered is being out there and being visible, and creating visibility for our overall brand, right? And it's definitely paid dividends for us in terms of what we see coming in and how much traction we see we're getting. The other thing too that I would say, like as a point of advice for your audience, is to look closely at what you're already doing and see if there are patterns, because that is actually how we identified accessibility as the area we wanted to specialize in. We were doing so much repeat work with accessibility with state universities, with nonprofits, and we were seeing that requirement increasingly come up. The first thing that we ended up doing is we started adding like a slide to our presentation decks about it, and like presenting that as something that we could do, on our website, like as a service under the old agency. And so I think that, just through law of attraction, obviously attracted more of that work through our existing customers. But then we discovered the idea of like, as we're creating processes around this, doing this more and more, that there was a real gap in the market for what we're doing just based on what people were telling us in our conversations with our customers. So what I would say is whether it's accessibility, whether it's working for a sub niche of a niche, right, like a certain kind of nonprofit, like that kind of thing. Um, Probably if you're any sort of designer, freelance person that has a lot of clients, or a small agency, probably the answer of what you should specialize into is already staring you in the face, and you just
Yeah.
have to kind of look and try to find the patterns, and try to create like the through line of what am I incredibly good at, that a lot of my customers are asking me for, that I also care enough about that I wouldn't mind just focusing on this one thing, right? And those to me are kind of the three criteria for what a niche should be if you're going to be effective at it.
Yeah, true. Well, so all right, so you picked accessibility, but like, how did you decide? Like, what at what point did you and Amber decide? Look, we need to start specializing. Like, did you just say like were you just fed up with certain things that were going on, and you're like, we should just try specializing? Like, what happened there?
Well, I wish I could say that we just like suddenly decided that and made like the perfect decision and it was done, right? But like many things, like you make mistakes along the way, and you kind of take the wrong turn and then have to course correct. So the initial conversation that kind of happened internally was that we need a product. We need a product. We need a product. And at the time, and this was like in 2019 or so, like late 2018, we were like, well, we are working with so many organizations in the event space. So these are like public events, conferences, and we had some very large, kind of high profile organizations. One was Lesbians Who Tech, which focuses on LGBTQ plus involvement in tech, and they're still around today. They're huge. Thousands of people attend their conferences on each coast every year. And then the other one was, if you've ever heard of the Lean Startup, Eric Reese and his company was a customer, and they had their annual events. We also had a large international architecture firm. So there were a few people in the event space that were coming to us for work, new website builds. And one thing we noticed was, well, they don't have like a good way to build and show like in a multi-track event schedule on their website. And so we actually built the free MVP of what eventually became called WP Conference Schedule, which we sold to the events calendar last year,
Oh,
for
wow.
a nominal fee. But we had never done much with it after the initial launch, and it had like a few hundred users. But so we built an initial product, and then COVID, and you know what COVID did to the public event space, right? And so all of our public event customers panicked and left. We had a
Mm.
massive decline in revenue in our agency, right? Because we didn't have a niche, we didn't have a clear identity that resonated with our customers, and we were just a deliverer. We were a delivery vector for services that most companies need, right? In terms of marketing. But there was nothing about that really made us that special, other than that we were reliable, we delivered good work, right? But there wasn't much else there that built any sort of identity or built any loyalty. Um, so I want to say that during that initial portion of COVID, I want to say the revenue decline was somewhere in the ballpark of 30 to 40%. Over like a 3 or 4 month period, we lost some very large customers. It was really scary, and it was really tough. And I know that we weren't the only agency that it was tough for. There were a lot of people out there in the digital marketing space that really struggled during that transition. And we weren't nimble enough to really capitalize on the changes, because I know there were plenty of other agencies and freelancers that did really well during that, right? It just kind of depended, I think, on where you worked and what sorts of customers you had. So we were really like we had kind of a path set in front of us. It got completely disrupted and blocked, and then made we had to make a very quick decision, which was, okay, this clearly isn't going anywhere. We're either going to shut this business down, or we're going to figure out what the next product is really going to be, and what we're going to specialize in. And so that was before Steve was involved in the business as a partner. He was just an employee at that time. We were thank goodness he stuck around. We were actively like shrinking the team, right? Like it was a very, very tough time. But eventually we just kind of, it just kind of clicked. We were like, we're doing so much work with public sector. Our public sector customers were still paying us. And despite this economic difficulty that was going on. Um, and we knew we needed to specialize. And so it was like that thing I said, where it was kind of staring us in the face, coupling that with uh, the other thing we had tried to niche into just completely dead ended, right? And so like accessibility was right there. It seemed like a good opportunity. We genuinely cared about it. And at around this time, going into 2020, we had just launched our first like large 6-figure plus budget government project where we had built a portal and we had invited user testers in from the Texas School for the Blind to test this thing. And so like during this time, like shortly before all of this stuff with COVID happened, we also were like hearing screen readers and like interviewing people who were using assistive technology just to get through their day, right? For the first time in like 2018, 2019. And so I think we cared a lot about it. We knew that it would make a difference and it would be a way to create this new brand that would put good back out into the world, that could align our business objectives with our personal values, and just be generally successful and also be specialized. So that's kind of what happened. It was honestly like a pretty winding road to get to accessibility. And so my takeaway there would be like if you've pursued a niche before or you're about to, and that doesn't pan out for whatever reason, just pay close attention to why it doesn't pan out. It doesn't mean that niches are bad. It may just mean that you chased the wrong one, or you were, in our case, we were unlucky, because the niche we chose to pursue went belly up in the first part of 2020 for a period of several months.
So then you all decided to rebrand into Equalize Digital at what point? And like why did, instead of just changing the focus of Road Warrior Creative, what made you decide to rebrand?
So this actually was surprisingly a very easy decision. So we had known for a long time that Road Warrior Creative was not a good brand. And the reason that I firmly believe it wasn't a good brand is what I referenced before. It's inside out branding. So the name of the brand had meaning for us, but it did not have meaning for any target audience. I mean, unless we had decided to like niche down into websites for I don't know, RV parks or something,
Right.
like maybe that would have made sense. But that we knew the second that we were going to do accessibility, we're like, okay, we need a name that speaks to the outcome we're creating and what our intended audience is going to care about and why they're going to reach out to us. And there were, so many names and so much back and forth with like trademarks, because we have an actual trademark or word mark on the name. But we eventually we got to Equalize Digital.
It's so
And
hard too
that's
to come up with a name. And then something that even has all the handles on social platforms and the website URLs available. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yep. Oh, and we had to buy our Twitter handle from someone in California. So for us, it wasn't even perfect.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, they didn't gouge us too bad because we really leaned in on the social good angle. So they cut
Mhm.
us a deal.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, so that's just crazy. So after you rebranded, like, did you, how did I'm sure you had clients that were still like, okay, what's going on here? And, well, now you're doing this, and then you're like, well, do we want to stick with this work or do we want to still continue doing that, the old work for clients? Like, how did that transition happen?
So I would say the transition is still going. So Equalize Digital became an official website and a name at the end of 2020. And that was around the time that Accessibility Checker, our accessibility scanning tool for WordPress, also launched, the free version. And then the paid version launched in January of the following year in 2021.
Great plug-in, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. During that time, the old agency website actually still existed. And the agency website maintained its existence, and we were still like sending bills and doing things under the old company name, um, for all of 2021. So originally, Equalize Digital, which is now Equalize Digital Inc., a Delaware corporation, was originally just just a DBA under our agency's LLC, because that was the most expeditious way to get it done,
Sure.
initially. So that transition, it was a lot of communication. We sent out a communication to all of our existing customers saying, hey, there's this other name here now. This is focused on accessibility and accessibility products and services. The other agency is still here. We're still the same team, etc. That it went on that way for a full year. 2021 to 2022 is when we did a full flip of the switch, and we're like, okay, the LLC doesn't exist anymore. We are Equalize Digital Inc. Equalize Digital Inc. acquired everything from the old LLC to operate under its umbrella. So there was a lot of legal stuff that happened, a lot of business registration stuff that happened that I won't bore your audience with. Suffice to say, we partnered with a very large law firm to get all that done and have it be very clean. Um, but we but then basically what we did is we just redirected the entire old agency website to a page on Equalize Digital's website, just saying Red Warrior Creative is now Equalize Digital. This is what we're still doing. This is what we're not accepting for new work, and we actually still have, I want to say, 4 customers that we're still doing marketing services for. And we still have, I want to say, around 50 to 60 websites that are on some sort of care plan from our agency days. And the reason that we still have that work is because in general, it is very low maintenance. It has a pretty good MRR. So it helps keep the current company's finances more sustainable and stable as it grows, because we've obviously taken on investors. We are hiring and spending beyond what we're earning because we have investment funds. And so we have a burn rate right now, and we are actively, investing heavily in growing Accessibility Checker and growing this to something at scale. And that MRR of those maintenance customers helps cushion some of that a little bit, if that makes sense.
Mhm. That makes sense. So yeah, so I mean, I did the same kind of thing when I went from doing all the things and then to specializing. I had some of the clients where I was doing stuff all the time and just kept doing stuff for them. And then as I got more of the accessibility work, I just started getting rid of less of the other stuff and
Yeah,
and narrowing things down. Well, a lot of designers are afraid to specialize because they're like, well, if I specialize, then I'm going to lose out on all these other clients or this other work that I want to do. But so it's like, do you feel like your new branding and specializing actually has helped you get more work and makes up for any of that work that you would have lost from the clients that were no longer going to be a good fit?
absolutely. And I will say that from like a new client acquisition standpoint, I think the number one thing that niching does for you, in my opinion, is it kind of cuts out the shiny object syndrome of marketing, because if you're properly niched, you know who you need to speak to, and you know where they are, and you know like what channels you're supposed to be using, right? So those I think are the hallmarks. If you're just a general marketing agency number 5724, like, you know we never really knew as Road Warrior Creative like where to effectively market ourselves, because we didn't actually have an identity, right? Like, if you give yourself a real identity that means something not just to you but to your customer, then you really can amp up what you're doing for marketing and have it be more meaningful and have it actually attract the people you want to be working with. um, and yeah, I think transitions can be scary, but as you've just heard both from Colleen and from me, uh, I'm talking to the listener here, is like, these transitions are not just flipping a switch. Like, all of your
Right.
old clients are gone that were paying you reliably, and suddenly
Yeah.
you're starting from zero, right? Like, you can be very gradual, you can be very intentional, and you can even have 2 brands that you are running simultaneously for a while, and just only take new clients on the brand you want to eventually replace the old one, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it can actually be fairly simple.
Well, it's funny because like when I got into accessibility, I was just kind of like, okay, I took this class. Somebody like recruited me to take her class in document accessibility, and I'm like, I don't have any clients asking me for this, right? So we'll just see what happens. It's like, okay, this might be nothing. I might have just paid for this course and invested in it, but never do this work again. I have no idea, right? And it's like I just
Yeah.
started talking about it, more clients started asking for it, and then it snowballed, and it was like, oh, so it's like you could kind of test the waters that way too. It's like, okay, just start talking maybe about doing one thing and then see what comes of that too. Like you're saying, and just it could be a very slow transition. And, you know, so yeah, that definitely works. And you get to keep your income for a little bit as you gradually work your way up with that. Well, the other thing too is that, a lot of designers have a fear of like, well, if I don't do all the work that my clients want me to do, then they're going to go elsewhere for that. I mean, I remember one time years ago, I had a client who was like, well, you should offer SEO because you do websites. And I'm like, I don't want to offer SEO. I don't know SEO. And if I do SEO, it's going to be like half assed, right? And I don't want to do something half assed just because you're asking me to do it. And I was like,
Hmm.
well, I guess I'm going to have to start, learning it, or I'm going to have to find someone else. And then I was just like, no, like just stop, because there's always going to be something else that's connected to that, that's connected to that, that's connected to something else, right? So I was like, no, I have to draw the line here. But there are so many designers that are like, well, I've got, they don't, a lot of them don't even want to code websites. They're like, I just want to design websites. And I tell them, it's fine. Just stick with like designing websites. Don't
Yeah.
try to be a developer too, so how do you like what do you do if clients come to you for work that you don't do? Do you feel like it's a
So
loss?
that that leads me into something that I was hoping I would get to say, which I think is probably the one of the more underappreciated parts of going into a niche, which is partnerships. That they are the number one driver now of our own growth. Are and I can't stress this enough, right? Like if you only do one or two things, right? So we have a WordPress accessibility scanning tool. We have remediation plans where people can reach out to us and have their website audited and remediated in tandem on a month to month basis. And then we can do standalone audits, and we can do monitoring plans for agencies or large organizations. That's it. That's and then we will build custom websites that happen to be accessible, but that is hopefully getting off the table in the next 6 months to a year. um, we're hopefully sunsetting that last one, but my point is that's it for us. So if anyone needs anything else, the answer is, well, we can't help you, but we have this great person over here who does incredible work in this area, and let me refer you, right? And so having because your customers have other needs, right, beyond what you can deliver for them if you're in a niche and you're not trying to be the everything person. um, and so if I'm, say, like Joe Hall, who's a really cool guy that does a lot of accessibility and he also does SEO, right? I really like him. He's a great guy. If I had someone reach out to me for SEO, I would probably refer them to Joe Hall, at Hall Analysis. And if I send enough people Joe's way, Joe might reach back out to me and say, "Hey, I noticed you've been giving me a lot of referrals. Like, I'd like to help you out if I can. I have these few customers who have been asking me about, accessibility remediation plans or scanning tools or whatever. Can I send them your way?" Right. And so you can like pick your people, or you can have these conversations with other specialists, and you can build these little reciprocal networks of referring people back and forth. And so then that is one way that you can grow, doing things within your specialty without having to dump a bunch of money into ads or you know or sponsorships or whatever else. You can just build these partnerships. Like for us, because we a lot of agencies benefit from using our tool. We actually partner with a lot of agencies who will refer us the accessibility work. And in turn, because we don't really like building websites, I'm hoping your audience doesn't include like our potential customer base, like that would be coming to us for website builds. But I'm just being honest here, like brutal honesty. Our team doesn't super love building websites. We would love to stop. We're very good at it, but it just stresses us out. Like,
It's a
and
lot
we
of
want
work.
a less stressful existence. It's not that we're
Right.
bad at it. It's just stressful. And so we 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 will send. What I was leading to is we charge a lot of money for our websites because we don't really want to build a lot of them, and they're kind of stressful. So we're just going to charge a lot. And that's kind of the barrier that we've put in place. And so there, we very frequently get inquiries from people who want a website, but they don't have the budget that we're at. And so I'm able to kind of farm those out selectively to agencies who are partnered with us in some way. And it's a great give and take relationship. And everyone gets to do the types of work that they want to do. Um,
Hmm.
so partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. It is one of the more underrated parts of going into a niche.
Oh, absolutely. But it's so much easier too, because then you can just focus on, just the type of work that you want to do and that you're good at and that you have like processes for. And then you're more profitable. And you don't have to sit there and go, now I got to switch hats all the time because now I have to do this other type of work that I don't really want to do or that I'm not really good at or whatever.
Hmm.
It's just so much
Absolutely.
easier. So much easier. And I think the other thing too is like a lot of designers, and I was like this too, it's like you just want to take on anything and everything. You feel like that's what you should be doing, but you can be very selective. And when you're more selective, you're more profitable.
Yeah. Well, and if we're talking about designers here, I have like a very micro case study.
Hmm.
Like, and these are friends of ours, but Bill and Dwayne from Cultivate WP, they for years were in that kind of reciprocal partner relationship. Bill is a very well-known developer who came up in Genesis, and many people have probably heard the name Bill Erickson who listened to this, at least tangentially. And then Dwayne was a designer who was very skilled, very good at what he does, and so they just had this arrangement where Dwayne's design projects would always have Bill as the developer. Bill's developed projects would always have Dwayne as the designer. And now they have created Cultivate WP, their business partners, and they are the biggest name in designing and building custom, highly performant blogs for people in the food blog niche,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's all they do. And they have this incredible company that's now like blowing up, right? And so that's the other thing that can come out of these partnerships. Like, just because you go into this niche doesn't mean you won't find this amazing partner, and then maybe eventually your niche turns into like a more holistic business with someone that you can really rely on to do great work, and then you can build a team if that's your ambition. It doesn't have to be your ambition, but like, I feel like just the like niching down, specializing down, just really, I've seen it create these opportunities that just generalism will not do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I resisted it for years. And now I just wish I had done it sooner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally wish that I had listened to all the people, 10 years ago plus saying
Right.
niche down, niche down, niche down. They were
Right.
right. They were
Hmm.
100% correct.
Absolutely. All right, great. Well, this has been really insightful. Did you want to talk about the plugin or?
So right now, I think what I would love, because
Mhm.
we are very much in the realm of advocating for accessibility, much like you, Colleen, is I would just encourage your audience, if they're doing anything inside or outside of WordPress, doesn't matter, just check out WordPress Accessibility Meetup. Please, it's on meetup.com. You can also just go to equalizedigital.com, and then under the About Us drop down, there's a link there for WP Accessibility Meetup. It is a twice monthly meetup that runs both morning and evening. So we have times that are friendly for people that are in Europe or Asia, etc. So that, and then we post the recordings as well. So there's, I think, 40 plus videos. Colleen, you've been a presenter at this meetup, so
Yeah, twice.
your audience will know if Colleen presented at our meetup that there's going to be good content there. But
Thank you.
it's going to level up your game in terms of accessibility, give you new stuff to think about, and we want as many people as possible to know that what they do on the web matters in terms of accessibility, and to learn as much as they can and to advocate for it when they can. So yeah, WP Accessibility Meetup, please check it out.
It's a great meetup. And, there's always so much to learn in accessibility. I mean, nobody out there, knows everything. And, some designers seem to think like, well, I don't know everything about it, so I can't do it. But nobody knows everything. And there's always something, so it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Yes.
And what I also like about the meetup too is that it's, you talk about so many different subtopics of accessibility, but you also have people doing demos with screen readers, and you're doing audits like live with, different people. So it's got so many great aspects to it.
Thank you. Yeah, we try to have a lot of variety.
And if you're not going to plug your plugin, I'm going to plug your plugin because the accessibility checker plugin is awesome. I've tried several other accessibility plugins in the past, and a lot of people think that a plugin, just you can just install a plugin, it's going to make your site accessible, and they don't work that way. But your plugin does so many alerts you to so many things that you can fix that so many other plugins never even get into, right? Some people might just install something that it only like checks for a few things, right? And so they're not getting that much done when they're installing that plugin. But with yours, you identify so many things on the
Yeah.
page. And they also like that it's when you're working on a page in the back end of WordPress, you can see the report, which is super easy to read. So designers should love it because it's really awesome. It's easy to read. And it just breaks it down so easily to tell you what that error is and then how to
Mhm.
fix it.
Well, thank
It
you so
makes it,
much. I appreciate the shout out for that.
yeah.
And I will say too that for the agencies in your audience, the paid version of Accessibility Checker does do bulk scanning. So if you have larger websites, it can scan those in bulk. And just before WordCamp US this year, we released a centralized reporting feature. So that will
Mm,
give you a site-wide score for accessibility to help with your reporting to customers. And we are currently working on and should release sometime in November a historical reporting module that will extend what we're already doing. And so you will actually be able to track progress over time. And hopefully, if you're doing it right, you'll be able to
mm.
see a declining number of issues over time for what's detected in our automatic scans. So we're super excited about that. And it's part of our overall objective of just to help organizations do accessibility governance better and do it natively inside of WordPress instead of having to rely on these ridiculously expensive external SaaSes that charge 50, 75, $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, so that's at equalizedigital.com.
Yep. And you'll see accessibility checker right up in the main navigation.
Okay, great. All right, well, thanks so much for coming on, Chris. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Colleen. It's really great talking to you today.
If you want to show off that you're a design dominator while supporting the podcast, be sure to grab a shirt, hat, mug, or other merchandise in one of 3 designs. Just go to creative-boost.com/merch.